Hi everybody, welcome back to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. Today we've got yet another special gun, and not only is it a special gun, but it's also an exceptional example of a special gun. Before we start, just want to say to everybody once again, thank you so much for liking and subscribing the channel. We're only 4 videos in, but the response has been absolutely overwhelming from worldwide and certainly here in the UK. Really positive comments, lots of great feedback, lots of great emails, lots of really interesting stuff that people have come out of the woodwork with and said, what's this, what's it worth? So absolutely loving it. And here we are again with another review. Everybody knows I'm a huge Miroku fan, and it's not something I hide. We've already done a couple of the Miroku President ranges. We did the G13 and the SP100. If you haven't seen those videos, you must see them because they are some absolutely knockout guns. So today we're going back to the late 1970s period of the G13. In fact, just to give you an idea, this particular gun is only about 70 guns apart in terms of serial numbers from the G13 that we first did. So it's absolutely on point, the same time in terms of period of manufacture. Now, this particular gun is the G11. So to put things into perspective, we talked about the fact that they produced 1,000 guns across the President range at the time, which was the G11, the G12, and the G13. So what that kind of makes the G11, it kind of makes it and I use the term very loosely here, it makes it the entry-level premium grade President. And it would have been the most affordable because it was the least, again, very loosely describing it as you know, not ornate, but it would have been the least ornate of the 3 models. We've looked at the G13, absolutely knockout with the black action, the very deep scroll work and the gold birds. And ultimately that's what you're paying for, because the deeper the engraving, the longer it takes and the more money it costs in terms of manufacture. So what we've got here is we've got the G11 President. Now this is, like I said, late 1970s. So it supersedes the 800 series in terms of the action frame, and we're going into the sort of the 3800. But what's quite interesting is it's a slightly different shape action. So it's kind of a crossover between the 800 and the 3800 in that the angle of the shape of the action and ultimately the head of the stock just differs very slightly. I know that because I know someone who's got one of these guns, and it is a later gun, and the action has got the straight line more like the 3800, which to put into perspective is the same as a modern day Miroku, whereby there's no chamfer, it's just straight down. Late 1970s, Miroku were very popular in the UK, being imported by Parker Hale, which is a name synonymous with shooting. A lot of the guys watching the videos that have been shooting for a long time will remember Parker Hale because they used to import Smith & Wesson for one, which was absolutely huge back in the days of pistols. And again, this was done to kind of showcase what the guys at Miroku were capable of up against the likes of the handmade Browning B25. And also, although there were side locks at the time, some of the S-series Berettas like the S3 EELLs, although there would have been a considerable price difference, I believe, but don't quote me on that. This is a game gun, out-and-out game gun. So at the time, traditional game guns would be very engraved quite finely with rose and scroll bokeh engraving, particularly something like, if you compare this to like a Browning B1 or a C1, it's a similar engraving pattern. And that kind of reinforces the fact that this is, you know, primarily an out-and-out game gun. So we'll start off with the action. So you've got the traditional deep-bodied Browning Miroku action. Like I said, a bit like an 800, you've got this kind of chamfer at the front in terms of the shape. Now, someone I spoke to who knows a lot about Miroku President said to me he believes that because these are custom-grade guns, that they would have actually given you the option to have it on the sort of older style action or the newer style action, depending on which you preferred of in terms of certainly aesthetics. Again, like I said, with the G13, this hasn't got the disc set strikers of an 800. It is standard coil springs, it's not V-springs. So the action, coin finish, very nicely engraved. You've got these sort of, these roses in the middle, nicely picked out, that are sort of bolder than the border scroll work. You've got carved fences. Now at the time, if you bought something like a Browning A1, which was the very entry-level B25, you would get the card fences. So I can only assume that Miroku have stolen it from them. On the underside, Again, you've got a nice mixture of this very deep sort of accentuated floral stuff with the border scroll work. And I think together it just works really, really nicely because it's a nice contrast. Now, this particular gun, if you look at the lumps on the bottom of the barrels, you will see there's very, very little marking whatsoever. This is a gun that has probably shot, and I'm going off the previous owner's description to me, 500-600 cartridges at most in its lifetime. And I'll come on to that in a minute because how this gun came to light is actually quite an interesting story too. So very, very nicely engraved, but not over the top. Like I say, you've got your border scroll work, your BC Miroku president there, and then just now and again, you've got these patches of the much deeper picked out floral stuff. Rolled trigger guard. Again, we've talked about that in terms of a mark of quality. The shotgun is right-handed, so therefore it would have a right-handed rolled trigger guard. Full-length tang trigger guard, which again is nicely engraved. Got this nice little point on the end. And just going back to the action slightly to the top lever, not as ornately engraved as something like the G13, but then again, it's not going to be because, and again, I use this term very, very loosely, this was a lower grade shotgun at the time. And by that, I mean it just had a few less bells and whistles, which would have made it more affordable, which ultimately means that out of all the presidents, this is probably the most common. I've probably seen 5 or 6 of these in my lifetime, whereas things like the G13, which we've previously reviewed, it was an absolute one-off. It's the first one I've ever seen. Hand polishing, just take the thing apart. Again, you've got this sort of sliding fore-end setup, not unlike a P25, it pulls off like that. And this is a really, really good example of the hand polishing because again, this gun has just not been used. And you can see all original bluing on the barrels. Where the fore-end sits, normally you will get witness marks where the fore-end clamps on and there's some contact. This gun just has not been used. So you've got the polished ejector slides, polished ejectors. With it being a game gun, it's stamped up as full and half, which is the standard factory choke-ins. Having had the bore gauge down this, I can confirm that the choke-ins are original and it's never been touched. Now, for those that watch the G13 review, you may recall I talked about a batch of these guns here in the UK being worked on by a company called Ladbroke and Langton. Now, following that video, I was actually contacted by a guy from Ladbroke and Langton, and he said, absolutely great video, really enjoyed it. Remember working on these guns. If you want an original foresight bead, which was the mother of pearl one, I've got one. So we're now in communications to put it back on the G13. And that gun was a gun that was re-barreled to a longer length because it was marked up as a skeet gun, which was available only in 26 and 28 inch. And it ended up as a 30-inch kind of solid rib game gun. Now, this is interesting because this is a 28-inch version. Again, you've got the solid rib and the standard brass foresight bead, which without a doubt confirms that Carl from Ladbroke and Langton will probably have had this one through his hands. And again, the story backs up with that because you've got the fore end, which is that kind of custom shape, which was not factory at the time, which was all part of the reworking. And also, when you look at the fact that this gun is 70-ish guns apart in terms of serial number to the G13, there's no question that these guns were converted and had some work done in the UK by Ladbroke and Langtons at the same time. So again, we look at the barrels, nominal bore. So these are 729, which is 18.4, which is why we know that the chokes are original. Wooden cleats, never been out. You know, that screw was put in the factory in 1977, 78, never taken out since. And you just look at this gun all over. Like I said, just in front of the fore end here, the muzzle, the thing just has not been used. There's barely a mark on the rib, which again, because with the way a rib's manufactured, you have angles on it, so you are going to get little marks where people sometimes, they might throw the gun slip down into the car and it might just take the edge off it, or it might get hit on a cage at a clay shoot. There is none of that apparent on this gun whatsoever. Just going back to the engraving, because I keep having these president reviews and I keep forgetting to talk about it. Now, the engraving is completely hand cut, as I'm sure you've heard me talk about before. This one is signed by the engraver. What we've basically got is we've got 2 initials. It is my opinion that because the Japanese person that's engraved it probably had quite a long, complicated name, that they've just used his initials, but I can not confirm or deny that. 28-inch solid game rib, half and full, original choke-ins. Talked about the polished ejector slides. Again, it's the same story in the forend. The hammers are polished as well. And again, the screws, they've just not been touched in this gun. There's barely a mark on the checkering. It is exceptional for what it is. So if we move on to the weight, because I know a lot of people like to know about the weights, it's exactly, in my opinion, where an over and under game shotgun should be. It comes in at £7 8 ounces. I've not actually checked the balance, so let's do that now. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the history and how this gun came to be in my possession. So we'll just slide the forend back on. Okay, and if we look at that, we'll put my fingers just on the hinge pin and look at that. Absolutely spot on. Nice fast handling gun, something you would use for, you would certainly use it for water pheasant shooting. You might take it partridge shooting. You could argue the choke's a little bit tight for that, or simulated game day, because whereas you, at the time, you could certainly buy a lighter weight game gun. Again, we refer back to the Browning B25s because this is kind of the market that Miroku were aiming at with these shotguns. You could buy a 27.5-inch A1, B1 lightweight game with a roach belly stock that would come in at just over £6. Personally, in my opinion, for modern day game shooting, they're not ideal because they're just too light for the bigger loads, and also too light if you wanted to go and shoot something like a simulated game day, because you will get a lot of punishment from putting a lot of cartridges through the shotgun. Onto the wood. We've talked about the forend. Standard forend at the time for most of these guns was actually a beaver tail forend, which is quite unusual, which would have had an ivory insert in here. So again, when these guns were reworked by Ladbroke and Langtons, I couldn't confirm or deny whether the whole thing was changed or whether it was slimmed down and recheckered. I assume it was slimmed down and recheckered because that would have been the most practical, the most cost-effective thing to do for the importers of Miroku at the time. We've got teardrops, dropper points. Again, a mark of quality. If you buy a new grade 5 Miroku today, you will get them. These are all hand cut checkering, double point. We've got the rosewood pistol grip with the ivory insert in it. Very, very similar to the G13. And you've also got the shield. Now, those that have watched previous videos will know that I talked about guns of a certain age, of a certain value, quite often get altered immediately quite often before they've even been shot. And this is no exception. Someone has had their initials put into the shield, which is exactly what it's for, no problem at all. And the good news is you can actually re-engrave these 2 or 3 times, no problem at all. In addition, the stock has been extended very slightly. An excellent job in wood. It's a very, very, very good match. You can almost barely see it, but what it has done is it's taken away the original plastic butt plate, which would have been horrible because of the shape of it. They toe out, they're not very nice to shoot. So a bit more comfortable to shoot. And the good news is it hasn't been shortened very much. It's still 14 7/8 inches, 14 1/4 without the wood. So still very, very usable. Even if you're a big guy like me and you want to put another inch on the back, no problem whatsoever. Traditional game stock, quite low in the comb, 3860, which is what you would get these days if you bought something like a Miroku. Or certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, if you bought an MK60, it would have that lower game stock dimension on it. Something that was pointed out to me following the G13 video in terms of the forend, we've talked about the style where it's kind of a crossover between a traditional pull-off Browning Miroku forend and one a B25, which is a slide forward. And again, it just shows it's synonymous with the quality. It would have taken a lot more engineering, and it's just a nice touch just to have something a bit different. I referred to this little disc in the forend in one of the previous videos as a ninja star or wheel of fortune. I can now confirm it's a chrysanthemum, which apparently in Japan is a highly prized flower. And again, it's a mark of quality. It's all about the pride that goes into these shotguns. Now, believe it or not, this gun was never sold until about 2008. The previous owner happened to stumble across it in its original cardboard box with all its greaseproof paper on. We've talked before about the fact that these were a lot of money. So to find, it sounds incredible to be able to find one that's not been sold for all that time, but a lot of competition in the late 1970s. It was quite an expensive gun. So it's not completely unheard of for something to be unsold in a dealer's storeroom, and that's what happened. So that happened. The previous owner, the guy I've acquired the shotgun from, purchased it, and so that's how I can tell you this gun has barely shot a cartridge, 500-600 approximately, because the previous owner had a couple of boxes through it, and the person I've acquired the shotgun from has put 300-400-ish through it again. Talk about the wood. Quite straight grain wood. Now the thing with straight grain wood is it's very, very good for low recoil. So despite this weighing only 7.5 pounds, you could probably take this out, shoot some quite considerable game shells through it, some big loads. And because of the style of the woodwork, it will be French walnut as well, which has got good recoil reduction capabilities. It wouldn't really kick you. Now, a case in point there is largely these shotguns were produced at a time when a lot of shotguns here in the UK were actually regulated. So what that means is there would be a manufacturer that would set these to shoot a particular cartridge. It certainly happened with B25s. I can remember some years ago, I came across a B25 A1 trap gun, and it came with the original pattern sheets. It said what cartridges it had been using. And again, if you go back to the late 1970s, there wasn't a huge amount of choice of cartridge here in the UK. You'd got Ely, who were absolutely huge. I don't think Express had been formed by then. And then you'd got some of the Eastern European stuff that was coming in, like Record and Bakel cartridges. And there was, I think, some Chinese cartridges. But if you wanted to buy, in terms of choice, there just wasn't a great deal. So most people would have shot through this kind of gun, Ely Grand Prix, Ely Impact, something like that. And for that, absolutely perfect. So following on from the Miroku G13 President review we did, I have had confirmed that the actual trigger itself, the trigger shoe, the trigger blade, is hand engraved also. And it's just, what Miroku achieve with these guns and how they look and how they feel. We've looked at the balance. You can't buy a shotgun off the shelf today, a mass produce one, and get it to balance like that off the shelf. It's very, very rare. And that is why these days we've got these kind of balance systems and people put barrel weights on and this sort of stuff, because in my opinion, it's all to do with mass production. It's all to do with availability of raw materials as well, because if you get a new grade 5 Miroku now, I always remember my years back in the gun trade. A customer came in to buy a new grade 5 Miroku MK38, which is a model we'll be moving on to in the future. And we had, I think, 5 or 6 to choose from in the shop. And the difference in the weight variation was 10 ounces for exactly the same gun. Now, it's supposed to have the same barrel weight, the wood's supposed to be the same density. And that's the problem, getting the consistency that some of these older guns offered, because they were essentially making less at the time, and there was more, in my opinion, there was more wood. Certainly you wouldn't go now to a shop and find a gun that stocked with French walnut. You would have to go to the likes of Holland, Wesley Richards, Purdy, one of the top English makers, before you would have the option to purchase, because it is just so rare. So that is the Miroku G11 President. If anybody's got any questions about this particular gun, please get in touch. I will do my best to answer them, although I hope I've covered pretty much everything in the video. One case in point I do want to mention, because we've talked about steel shot and we'll be talking about steel shot a lot more. Mirokus have got quite soft metal barrels, so they are no problem to bore them out, or you can multi-choke this. As it is, you couldn't shoot any kind of steel for it because the chokes are too tight. Yes, it would be a crying shame to alter the chokes, because it takes away from the originality and the nostalgia of the gun. But at the same time, if you want to own something as stunning as this, you really want to be using it. So my suggestion, as an all-rounder, will be to have the chokes taken out to something like 1/4 and 3/8, which is 10 and 15 thou, and that would make it a very usable, nice little gun. That has been the G11 President. Again, it's a stunningly rare gun. If you haven't seen one before, I'm really pleased to show it to you, because these older guns, I keep saying this, they are just so difficult to come by, because people tended to buy them, shoot them forever, and quite often, they're passed down through the family. But to find something like this that's been mothballed for a number of years, and then only shot on high days and holidays, and now I've got it in my possession. Just incredible. Please keep liking the stuff we're doing, subscribing, and again, I've said it before, if there's something you want to see, a particular video, a particular review, regardless of what it is, let me know and I will put it on the list, and I will do my best to find that gun, and then I can give you my honest opinion, which is what I'm trying to do in these videos, along with imparting some of my knowledge. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you again with another rare shotgun review here at the Eastfield Gunroom. Cheers.